Recently I did a video about the beast of the sea and what that means. And in doing so, we ended up touching on things like beast of the field and what the field is and what the beast is. And while doing that, I hit on a little part of Genesis 25, which is the part of where Abraham was buried in the Cave of Machpelah. And I sort of stumbled my way through it, and I guess it occurred to me midway through that I had actually never talked about it. I just spent time looking into it. So I thought it's quite interesting. It would be worth showing you. And I think in a lot of ways, the act of showing you will show you the method in which I reach conclusions, so that when you get to the end of them, it just sort of makes sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus in on verses 9 and verses 10. We'll come back and sort of hit a little bit of the before and after, but overall, everything that we want to explore is 9 and 10. So 9 is this verse right here. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite. And what I've done here is I've highlighted the words in which we have to go back and find the meanings, because what happens is the Bible is shrouded in a layer of mystery. That is the thing, right? There is this understanding that somehow we're missing something, and Jesus says, hey, you're missing something. So it's not even, but that has led people into all kinds of theories and other adventures. But what I've discovered, or what I've realized, or what I do, is that a lot of it is just hidden inside of the names. And so for whatever reason, the names stay the same, but the meaning of those names and a handful of, well, more than a handful, a decent amount of phrases. And if you understand those things, then all of a sudden that veil begins to be lifted, and it's way more interesting than what one might first think. In fact, I have vivid memories of people in my life complaining that the Bible is a boring list of names. Like, they try to read it and they're like, it's just, then you get to the parts where they're just naming people. And if it's not anything more than names, you're damn right, it's pretty dry. But when you realize it's the names that's hiding the mystery, then some of that dryness just starts to dissipate. So in this case, Isaac and Ishmael, right? These are two half-brothers, but those are names. This cave has a name. It's before another thing, which has a name. It's on a field, which is named. It's a field of a person who's the son of a person, right? So these names, just in this one verse, we're looking at 2, 4, 6, 7 people in one verse. So that should give you an idea of the amount of work that could be required in every little story to get towards something. So when we get to the end of this, realize that it took me, it's kind of like buying wood at the lumber store. Like, first I had to go to the lumber store and I had to load the lumber. And then I had to go to the checkout and go through that god-awful ordeal. And then I had to go to my vehicle and unload it again, at which point I drove to a place where I had to unload it again. And then at some point I grabbed each piece and began to build something with it. So you are getting the benefit of just watching the building process. But we have skipped the before. So you're welcome. Verse 10, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth, there Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. So this one, it's 4 names, 2 are the same, so 3 more names. So that's a grand total of 10 names for 2 verses that we have to sort of filter through. And you can see how, like, 10 words or 10 meanings of things, 10 concepts, could really, really be enough to sort of tip the scales on what things mean. So what I'd like to do is just, these are the 2 verses together, and notice that I've put into parentheses and his sons Isaac and Ishmael, because what I'd like to do is abstain. Yes, I did kind of hit on who I think Isaac is on my Jacob video, saying that Isaac is in fact the Greek culture. So you can take of that as you will. And we have not talked about Ishmael because we have not talked about Ishmael. So what I really want us to do is to begin the dissection, not here, because here is just, these are the perpetrators of everything that's going to unfold. And so who they are would then be reinforced by what we discover here. So this is not important yet, if that makes sense. So we're going to start at the word buried. And what we have here is buried him in the cave of Machpelah. And Machpelah, and you're going to notice that I have almost exclusively moved to the metaphysical meaning there is literally a group that was started back in the early 20th century that went through, and they have done an amazing job of interpreting these names. So I use that because I have found it to be quite reliable. There's several other places that you can go. What I don't recommend, if you ever want to try this on your own, is do not, well, I mean, you're going to put it into Google or whatever search engine, and right now, as of about a week ago, you get an AI that tells you what things mean, and it's okay. But it's just doing what you would do, which is pull from a bunch of places. Unfortunately, for some reason, baby name places have earned top spot. I guess it makes sense somehow. I ignore those as hard as possible because they tend to be overly rosy, which I'm not looking for rosy, I'm looking for right. And the metaphysical people, they seem to have done their homework, and it's pretty good. So, in this case, the meaning of Machpelah is double cave, equally divided, double, twofold, manifold, folding, winding, spiral, form, portion, and part. So if you go to your standard Sunday school class and study this, there is it's common for people to know that there's a double cave where Abraham is buried. And that comes from this word here, Machpelah. So, double cave. And I'm just saying, hey, it's not literal. There's not actually a cave with a cave in it. But let's continue. So what you want to do, right, is you still have buried him in a cave of Machpelah. And we've looked at the definition. So then you start to sort of take the overall meaning. Notice that here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 choices, and I have to sort of look at them and go, what is the overall meaning of this? So there is a certain amount of editing that I must do, and anytime I do that, I run the risk of ruining the entire thing. But I feel like once you do it a few hundred times, you get not terrible, like getting the gist of something. So in this case, what we would want to turn this into is buried him in the double-sided divided, right? And that just comes from double, twofold, double, divided, folding. So like there's most of these words are giving you the idea that there's two, it's almost like this or this. There's two portions, and that's kind of what Machpelah is. This goes two ways. It's double-sided, it's divided. And I've taken liberties here because what is a cave? And I've looked that up, and I don't want to spend time on that, but cave is, in this case, it's literally a tomb, but it's also a hole, right? If you think about a hole, and in some ways in this story, you're going to see that it's actually a trap. So I sort of added my own, there's some editing here, but not much. I'm not changing any words. I'm just trying to like rephrase the same word to get a little juicier meaning. That's it. No extra words. Just a little better definitions. If that's okay. If not, you can take this and delete it. Otherwise, I think just stick with me. So then it goes to, which is before, memory. Before, right? Something's in front, on the face of, before. Like if I stand in front of you, I'm before you, or if I come before you, I'm in front of you. If I stand in front of you, it's also, I'm in the face, on the face of. So that's before. And here I've sort of begun trying to differentiate between how I've addressed one word with the underline italics, and the other one is I've bolded the letters, the words. So memory, fully assembled, well-fed, abundantly supplied, fatness, firmness, virility, vigor, strength. Well-fed, fatness. It sort of reminds me, in many ways, of how the cows are described in the dream that Joseph interpreted of Pharaoh. There was fat cows, and there was skinny cows. And the fat cows or the cows of plenty. And I think that's exactly what we're looking at here. Is we are looking at a world of abundance, excess, plenty, fatness, luxury, if you will. Luxury would be enough and then a little bit more, a luxury. So if we take the first one and we add it to the second one, it would then read, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, which now we can say is something like buried him in the double-sided tomb, in the divided trap, which is before abundance, which is on the face of abundance, which stands in front of abundance, luxury, excess, fatness. So they buried him in the tomb that comes from, right, that comes out of this abundance. And that's what it's saying so far. In the field of Ephron. And just taking a little piece from our most recent video about the beast of the sea and how we talked about what a field is, and a field is where battles happen, right? A field is the battle. It is the warfare. So in the field of Ephron, and Ephron means fawn-like, gazelle-like, quick, volatile, spirited. So those words simply mean like bang, quick, instant, gazelle-like, volatile, quick. So in the quick, volatile battle / warfare, the son of Zohar the Hittite. So the son of Zohar, and Zohar is dazzling brilliance, whiteness, white nobility, distinction, purity. So that comes from the son of, so dazzling brilliance comes from, so I've changed the words from the son of to that comes from, but it means the same thing. So that comes from the dazzling brilliance of Hittite, of broken in pieces, sunder, dismay, terror, dread, of terror, fear. So then if we add these all together, right? So just as a verse, it's just saying Isaac and Ishmael, unspoken here, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite. I just want to say this. If you just look at that verse, you open a Bible and you read, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite. That means jack shit. Right? That just means, oh, there's a guy named Ephron. His dad was Zohar, and he sold Abraham a field. It has no, like, you have to really what is it that Jesus said? They listen, but they don't hear. They see, but they don't see. Right? This is all in front of you. But unless you spend some time, you can't see it, even though it's right there. So this would now sound like buried him in the double-sided, divided tomb slash hole slash trap, which is before abundance in the volatile warfare that comes from the dazzling brilliance of terror. The field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. So, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. The battle slash warfare which the founding nations, he's the founder, right? So in this case, Abraham represents the original, not Sumer, but that first round of civilizations that we can see in history. The ones that were all together. They were even called like a brotherhood. If you read, so there's letters that they have uncovered between Akhenaten's daughter and a Hittite queen, and so they were like this world of kings and queens that had these civilizations were in constant contact and sort of acted like one big global neighborhood. Abraham. But that's kind of Abraham. Even though Abraham becomes more specifically one of those people, it's kind of like Joseph, where Joseph is this and this. Abraham is this and all of this. So the battle which the founding nations purchased from the children of Heth, from the offspring of the broken, destroyed, fear-filled, terrorized people. So, if you would rather, we can even say the violence which the nations reaped from the people, from the broken, terrified, destroyed people. So when you put it all together, you get, and I might just go ahead and like take out a few of these words so it just flows better, but you can see for yourself how I arrived at this destination. So Isaac and Ishmael buried Abraham, right? Buried him, buried them, buried the father, the founding nation, buried him in this double-sided tomb, which is on the face of abundance and excess, in a quick, volatile violence that comes from the dazzling brilliance of terror. The violence which the founding nations purchased from the children of the broken and destroyed and terrified. Before I go there, it paints a very disturbing image. It's saying there is the children of the broken, terrified, and destroyed. So when I say, the other day I was saying that, Ishmael and Isaac are not being kind sons to their old dad. This is terror. It comes from the dazzling brilliance of fear, terror, right? It's letting you know that when shit falls apart, people lose their goddamn minds and they start tearing the whole world apart in a frenzy. This is what the unraveling of society looks like. It looks like the quick, volatile violence that comes from the dazzling brilliance of terror, which the countries brought on themselves, purchased from the broken, terrified people. Like that's... Whoo. And then it ends with, there Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. So they're buried together, and all the other children as they die, and their wives are brought with them there as well. But what you really need to understand is that Abraham and Sarah, the man and the woman, the people and the culture, so they're the founding nations, the father of a multitude. They're those first early, what are we talking? We're talking the Mycenaeans, the Minoans, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, this whole little ring of people, these nations were buried. And their culture of, here, it says nobility. Why do I say nobility? Because Sarah literally means noble lady. Nobility, noble woman. And remember, a woman is a culture. So if you're a noble woman, that's the name of your culture. Then your culture is literally a culture of and for the nobility. So maybe you can see that, that might be why the people were broken, because the whole society was not based on them. They just were the footstools for the people running the place. And what I want to show you, I don't want to show you this yet. So that's what Isaac means. It means he laughs. And Ishmael means understands God, listens to God, hears God. And Abraham and Sarah. So I went ahead and lined up all of the characters of this story, but I want us to get to this. And so I keep saying over and over again, it's probably the most important thing you don't know about. And I recommend that you spend time, and you're going to begin to see why this is clearly what this is. It's not even, it's how I can locate, like, the way I'm also able to do this is I need markers that can, like placeholders, like, okay, from this point is 100% this thing, and I know this is 100% this thing. So the stuff I'm not sure about, at least I have an idea of where I'm at, and it just, it works perfectly. But let's take a look at the late Bronze Age collapse. I'd just like to read these first couple paragraphs. The late Bronze Age collapse was a time of widespread societal collapse during the 12th century BC, associated with environmental change, mass migration, and the destruction of cities. The collapse affected a large area of the Eastern Mediterranean, North Africa, and Southeast Europe, and the Near East, in particular Egypt, Eastern Libya, and the Balkans, right? This whole area, which is where the civilizations existed in 1200 BC. It was sudden, violent, and culturally disruptive for many Bronze Age civilizations, and it brought a sharp economic decline to regional powers, notably ushering in the Greek Dark Ages. And we briefly touched on that the other day. Notice what I'm about to say, Sarah. The palace economy of Mycenaean Greece, the Aegean region, and the Anatolia that characterize the late Bronze Age. Not just one thing, but the whole thing disintegrated, transforming into the small, isolated village cultures of the Greek Dark Ages, which lasted from around 1100 to the beginning of the better known Archaic Age around 750, or as we said the other day, 776 is a standard date, but 800 is another one as well. The Hittite Empire of Anatolia and the Levant collapsed, while states such as the Middle Assyrian Empire in Mesopotamia and the New Kingdom of Egypt survived in, it says, weakened forms. That's an understatement. You should go study this. Other cultures, and this is why I've held off on Ishmael, because just hear this sentence. The whole world is collapsing due to people movements and the unraveling of society. And what they're not saying here is that all of these little dots that you can't see, here, I'll click a big, these are cities that were burnt to the goddamn ground, especially the palaces. So this was most definitely not favorable to Sarah. Other cultures, such as the Phoenicians, enjoyed increased autonomy and power with the waning military presence of Egypt, Assyria, and West Asia. Competing theories of the cause of the late Bronze Age collapse have been proposed since the 19th century, with most involving the violent destruction of cities and towns. These include volcanic eruptions, drought, disease, invasions by the sea peoples, or migrations of the Dorians. And if you don't know who the Dorians are, it's part of the three groups of Greeks before they were Greeks that became the Greeks. So what do you say, Isaac? Economic disruption due to increased ironwork and the changes in military technology, so on and so forth. So go study this, and you'll see that I'm not just blowing smoke, that the Bible, in my mind, is clearly saying that there was a abundant excess world full of rich nobility, which is what the world was for a long time. And then outside people came in for whatever reason. Outside terrified people came in with lightning speed. And in fact, it's hard to say who it was. There seems to be, I don't know. Let me get to this, and then there seems to be the Greeks for sure, but there's also this pesky thing about the sea people. We can't really get our finger on the sea people. We don't know who the sea people are, but for sure the seafaring culture of the Phoenicians sure did kick ass. So I'm just gonna go off on a limb here and say, like, the Greeks and the Phoenicians, and they could have even been the same people, but they had a different view on the world, hence a different mother, right? One person took the culture of Egypt, or the slaves of Egypt, or whatever the handmaiden of Egypt is. And Egypt, like we said, was, if nothing else, this commercial corporatism. And what are the Phoenicians known for? Being the merchants of the ancient world. And what are the Greeks known for? Philosophy and culture. And so it's interesting that their word is happy, or to laugh, laughter. Because I saw one place somewhere that the Greek culture was defined as seeking to understand the best avenue for happiness. Whereas the Phoenicians, they sold shit. Lots of purple shit. And it's interesting that they did just fine when the entire world didn't. So I believe there's a story in these two. But, you know, so when you go back and you just read that verse again, or those two verses again, or the whole thing again, right? So first off, it's saying Abraham represents something like the first civilizations. And that's an interesting concept, and it's not easily defined, hence the reason I am sort of pussyfooting around and kicking that can until I fully get my head around it. But if we did Genesis math on this, 175 years, which is the life of Abraham, would actually be 1,750 years, which is interesting because that's a very specific number. And we have almost 100% certainty that this date is either 1200 or 1100, depending on where you want to start. I mean, just look at the 1177 that I showed you, right? So the Bronze Age collapse is somewhere between 12 and 1100. So if you just add 1700 to that, that would take you to 2800, 2900 BC. And this is where I hesitated, and I'm not 100% sure because it definitely steps on the foot of Adam. And it's clear that Abraham comes from the descendants of Noah. We've been able to pinpoint Noah to about 2200 BC. So I don't really know, unless they just mean Abraham represents the entire cluster of early civilizations, the first thing. And so ironically, it does fall within the traditional framework of what we consider the Bronze Age. But so if nothing else, Abraham is the Bronze Age, which was about that long. And when the Bronze Age ended, when these early original founding civilizations of humanity died, they were definitely gathered to their people. The people gathered around these nations as they burnt the fucker to the ground. And his sons, the early Greeks and the Phoenicians or Sea Peoples, not sure if they're the same, but I'm pretty sure they are, they definitely assisted in the burying them in the cave of, what do we say that meant? Machpelah. That was in this, right? So if this is a double cave, well, on one face is the beginning of these new civilizations, but on the other face is the death of the old civilizations. Which is before abundance, right? So if you're a desperate people, well, I think we've already beaten that bush. So now when you go back and you watch the thing about Beast of the Field, and I mumble my way through how this is an important story. This is literally where Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph are or will be buried. So this is when they all go to this same place, it's quite profound if you realize that it is describing in an interesting, I don't know what you would call this. It's not esoteric, but it's hidden, but it's right there, right? So all you have to do is a tiny bit of substitution. So it's not impossibly hidden. It's just, I guess, as long as somebody's in charge of the story framing, it would never occur to you that Ephron, it's not a dude. It's not a guy named Ephron. So, there's so much of that in the Bible. And really, until you embrace what we just did here, it's sort of dry, it takes some time. And you have to kind of it's a little dangerous because you have to make decisions. Especially if you're early to this party. There's not a bachelor degree in Bible deciphering. And there's not a proven, tried method that you were taught in your first year of school, that you took your final exams and proved your ability to understand this. You are a frontiersman. You are out in the wilderness cutting down trees because the only thing in front of you is danger and people that want to kill you. There's no stores here. We are on the frontiers of, unfortunately, if enough people ever figured out what I'm saying, it's kind of a dynamite stick, right? This is the bubonic plague to traditional Christianity. And I don't mean for it to be, but if you understand, but at the same time, when you do understand that this is an incredibly old book that seems to cover the spread of before and during, how this came to be is the most documentable miracle of all time. The problem with any other religion is we have to have faith. But literally, there's already thousands of experts that can date things. You can go, oh, here's the manuscript from 200 AD, 200 BC, and you're looking at the history of 1945. You're looking at a description of an uncertain past event that they still haven't gotten their head around. Well, it's right here. So on one hand, this is it's the double cave. And then understanding probably will come quickly and suddenly. And the way ideas happen is there will be violent upheavals of understanding. But in 3 generations, nobody will even remember. Hopefully, you will never look at the Cave of Machpelah the same, and you have a better understanding. And you can blow some people's minds as you unfold this for them. So, cool.